Hi there, and greetings to you on this very pivotal moment in the yearly cycle, which is the Scorpio Full Moon moment. I'm Maximilian. We're going to talk about the Scorpio Full Moon, which occurs on Monday evening Central European Time, Monday the 12th of May. And yeah, let's get into it. The reason why I'm saying it's such a pivotal moment in the year is, of course, because we as human beings tend to experience the energy of Scorpio as intense and profound, transformative. And while transformative has all of this new age, hippie, wonderful, butterfly symbology connected to it, the actual process of transformation means transforming a certain form, a certain pattern, which is, of course, where we also meet the Taurus archetype. Taurus is formation and the creation of form itself, and the stability which we seek and yearn and desire and need with it as human beings. I've got a physical form, and my God, it would hurt a lot to fully transform that, right? So even though Scorpio and Scorpio archetype has all of these words associated to it that we on the healing journey, spiritual self-awakening, self-individuation journey tend to associate with very profound and important steps and necessary evolutionary growths, the actual process is often quite painful. And Scorpio full moons, even though, of course, they are a yearly thing, just like every full moon is, we go and look at the entire zodiac from every angle throughout the year, at least when it comes to the moon and the sun. So the conscious ego identity, the sun, where and how we want to channel our life force, and the reflection, especially of the full moon, of where and how are the deeper sub or semi or fully unconscious emotional patterns which the ego sun identity maybe in that moment doesn't really want to face or integrate. So this endless dancing polarity and intertwining yin-yang symbology of the sun and moon moves us through the entire zodiac year. And yeah, even though there's a Scorpio full moon, of course, every year, every Taurus season, they tend to be the ones that emotionally are often very impactful, right? Of course, it also depends on where this is sitting in your own personal birth chart, which house is Scorpio in. Are there any planets in Scorpio or actually very close to the full moon? This full moon will be on 22 degrees. We'll go into the chart also in a moment. So when you have personal planets on the degree or close to the degrees of the full moon, or where the sun is standing at that moment in Taurus, you will experience these configurations stronger. So some Scorpio full moons might be very intense for you, and some others, they're just passing by. You're more in the audience, witnessing how the collective or how people close to you are going through this kind of energy internally, or also in the transformations of their lives. So the other reason why Scorpio full moon is always very interesting is because, of course, from the standpoint of the Buddhist worldview, it's one of the most important, if not the most important, Buddhist festival in the yearly cycle, and is said to mark the birth, so the incarnation, the enlightenment, and then also the ceasing of the physical life, so the death process, the death moment of Siddhartha Gautama, who turned into the Buddha. And there, of course, it reveals a lot about the energy and energetic dynamics behind what Taurus and Scorpio, these two sister signs, constitute in human psyche on a psychological level, on a mythological level, and on an even deeper energetic level. This is a big yearly festival for all the Buddhists in the world. And then there is also, last point before we get into the actual astrology of the moment, the fact that, and some of you might be aware of it, the fact that the Alice Bailey material, Alice Bailey was a student and kind of continued the work of Helena Blavatsky, that Alice Bailey and the Tibetan master she was in contact with, called DK or Dwachkul, that they also said that the first 3 full moons of the zodiac year, so the one in Aries to Libra, Taurus to Scorpio, and Gemini to Sagittarius, that on some deeper esoteric level, that these 3 full moon festivals are said to be the most important festival points in the spiritual year, where the full moon of Aries to Libra has a resonance to Easter, the second one of Taurus and Scorpio to the Buddha, and the third one is said to be in connection to humanity at large, the Gemini archetype, the two brothers, the two mirrors of two human beings, and also this mythical figure of Sanat Kumara. We're not going to go there today. We will still talk about Alice Bailey and Shamballa and the Shamballa impact maybe for a minute at the end, if I dare to. But first, let's get into the astrology of the moment. Remembering first thing that every full moon is the culmination of a new moon, and that no cycle is independent from another moment in the cycle. And of course, with this new moon in Taurus, we had right around that time the last exact opposition from Mars to Pluto, showing that this moon cycle carries that energy in its seed, and that seed will come out and blossom at one point or another, whether that's for us personally or collectively on the world stage. And it was the last opposition from Mars to Pluto out of 3 that they formed over the entire last 6-7 months, since early November basically, which just adds a lot of intensity to this moon cycle, which on some level we have already seen play out. And I without wanting to do any predictions or anything, I still feel we will still see live out or come into manifestation in a stronger way as well, without wanting or knowing anything concretely, right? But yeah, Mars and Pluto, the oppositions, are always very intense, very profound, and talk so much about power and the loss of power and disempowerment, but then also re-empowerment, teaching us where and how our own inner power lies. The Mars and Leo wants to be in control of our own fate and our own destiny and to make our own mark. But then Pluto in Aquarius shows us where and how are there greater collective powers and forces, whether they are social or cultural, or unconscious within ourselves, or unconscious within the collective human mind, that are overpowering us. And so part of this moon cycle, just like every Scorpio full moon, talks about where and how we come into the experience of power or powerlessness, and how can we rewrite certain stories or paradigms there. Given that now Pluto turned retrograde in Aquarius, this has so much to do with where and how we try to adapt to social and cultural norms or social and cultural conditionings and patternings. Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn, right? The modern rulership of Uranus does apply, but on some other level there's also Saturn, right? Aquarius is fixed air and can show a rigidity of mind. Air always relates to the mind, and it's fixed air. Yeah, it can be very far out and very fast and very high and very genius, but it can also become very rigid. And where and how we have maybe tried to adapt our self-identity or suppress our heart and our heart's desires, Leo, so that we will fit into the group, will be part of the tribe, the collective, the family, the cool kids, the corporations, but in that way had to suppress parts of our authentic individuality, which is of course where both Leo and Aquarius talk so much about, that journey of self-individualization, to show and live from our true authentic heart, our true radiant rainbow colors of Aquarius. So Pluto just turned retrograde a couple of weeks ago, last week, and with that also shows this deepening journey of humanity, of coming into contact where and how are there deeper underlying, hidden, subconscious, suppressed in the shadow, not revealing or unveiling themselves, powers and power structures that govern our life in really dramatic and big ways. And where and how do we have to now untangle from them? Bringing us to the Scorpio full moon itself. So let's go into the chart for a moment. And here you can see, right, it's Monday, the 12th of May, evening 8 o'clock here in Greece, but just for your local time zone. And the sun and moon are of course opposite, as they are with every full moon. And again, this speaking of the illumination of the unconscious emotions that maybe have not fitted in to the solar light, the daylight image that we want to establish with Taurus and Taurus energy. I said it earlier, Taurus is about form and formation, how we can create form and stability in the physical, incarnated experience, the karna, the flesh, the embodied sensual presence, where then these dynamics of Scorpio full moon tend to erupt quite often in very intense ways. Intense is a word of Scorpio, onto the scene. So where and how have there been emotional urges, emotional desires that maybe did not fit in with the way that we like things to be, the stability of the status quo that Taurus establishes? And this brings us to one of the most significant indicators of this full moon, which is that the sun is approaching a conjunction with Uranus. It's on 26 degrees, so that it should be exact on Thursday, Friday next week. So a couple of days after the full moon, but it's already in the full moon energy. The sun together with Uranus by itself in a full moon signifies where and how are there moments where rupture or certain shocks and surprises come into the system, come onto the stage, that erupt from that unconscious, but with a drive and desire to bring greater authenticity, to bring greater liberation and freedom. The new side of Aquarius, the rulership of Uranus with Aquarius, the authenticity, the freedom, the liberation, the collective liberation, hopefully, keeping my fingers crossed, but also our own personal self-identity. And where and how have there maybe been the moon in Scorpio, emotional patterns and emotional habits that undermine our own power, that sabotage ourselves, and the full moon being this piercing of the veil, the piercing of illusions, that don't make sense anymore, that are not in resonance with both our authentic true selves, the Leo and Scorpio axis that has been so present the last weeks and months, but then also that does not fit into the deeper emotional drives and desires that maybe also constitute our being, which don't necessarily fit into, oh, but I've always done it this way, or no, this thing is set in motion now. Taurus likes to stay with things, even if they don't necessarily serve anymore. There's an energy in Taurus that can get stuck, right? It's life force that accumulates very strongly, hence Taurus can become so magnetic. But then Scorpio energy is always the full-on direct hit of like, but what is underneath it? What is hidden behind it? What are you trying to protect? What are you trying to hide? Let's go there, let's go deeper, and always another level deeper. So Scorpio has this piercing, penetrating, unveiling energy. And to see that we've got a Scorpio full moon with the sun conjunct Uranus, it's also, of course, the Wesak festival. And we're in this pivotal year where all of the outer planets are about to shift signs, at least for the first time, from water and earth, right? Pluto was in Capricorn and earth, Saturn and Neptune were in Pisces, and Uranus and Taurus, and they're all shifting now to fire and air signs, showing that over the next year or so, there's an immense speed that will pick up, an immense energy that lifts up. Air and fire is quick and fast. It's not embodied. It's much more the mind and the spirit. Air is the mind, fire is the spirit. It's an energy that will, over the next 1.5 years, until they're all fully settled into these new signs, disrupt a lot before we also will be able to settle into that new status quo, into that new, oh, this is how things are now, or how things will be now, or who I am now. This Scorpio full moon shows us a moment in time where these unconscious desires, emotional patterns that are maybe actually much more true than the surface material security that Taurus has established, whether that's our self-identities, our relationships, or our work patterns, or where we live, on our dreams, on our aspirations, that we may be subdued. Think about the mythologies of Taurus, especially the one of King Minos with the divine bull, who he didn't want to sacrifice. That's the Taurian desire and greed to hold on and to not transform, to not sacrifice. Scorpio, he was gifted the divine bull by Poseidon because he made an offering and he wanted it as a sign that he's actually truly the king of Crete. But then the bull was so beautiful and it was like, oh my God, that is a nice bull. I'm going to keep that. And he tried to trick Poseidon, which of course he didn't like. And then the story ensuing that his wife fell in love with the bull, la-di-da-di-da, and the Minotaur was born. half human, mostly human, but with a bull's head, this monster. Also the pull back to the animal, the pull back to an incarnated human enfleshment in our deep embodiment, which these Taurus mythologies also always talk about. But staying with that level of the bull was kept underneath the king's palace in this labyrinth, in this maze where there was no way out. Nobody was able to do it. And he would bellow, and he would consume life force. People had to be sacrificed to him, but all to suppress that energy, right? And this is what can happen with Taurus a lot when we try to hold on too much to what gives us a sense of stability or so-called peace, that we tend to suppress these deeper desires and urges, which Scorpio wants to know nothing of. Scorpio wants only that, only which is true, and no matter what we have to transform to get there, this is what this is really about, the deeper soul desire, which the Scorpio full moon might highlight very, very strongly. And since the sun is together with Uranus, Uranus brings disruptions, that's the word. Scorpio is more eruptions, like a volcano. Uranus is more disruptions. Disruptions, turning things upside down, sudden, quick, impulsive, unexpected lightning strikes, right? Uranus has this very strong electric energy, which can give a lot of energy and a lot of vitality into old and stale systems. And in that way also maybe reintegrating and re-embodying parts of ourselves that we cut off, that were not truly in alignment, right? With what Mars and Pluto have talked about now, right? Of course, also because Mars is the ruler of Scorpio, Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio. There's still, even for this full moon, the opposition is really waning. It's getting out of the field, but it's still present. And either way, Mars and Leo talks about ruling this Scorpio full moon. Where and how do we follow our heart's desire and are truly authentic with ourselves? Dropping all masks, dropping all illusions or pretensions, to live from the heart fully, and in that way find a deep re-empowerment, and to learn to love our fatedness also, to see, yeah, there are greater forces, and I am subject to fate, I am subject to unconscious urges, but I still can choose to activate that heroic archetype within me, no matter if I'm a man or a woman, no matter what kind of heroes or heroine journey we are embarking on, even if it stays centered around the home and hearth. It's not less of a hero's or heroine's journey. It does not have to be about going out into the world and slaying the dragons there. The dragons are all inside, right? That the outer journey, even if it happens, is only a representation of the deeper inner work that wants to occur here. And so this Mars and Leo ruling the full moon, and we're coming out of that cycle of the new moon in Taurus where Mars and Pluto were still exactly opposite, right? All of these ways in which we have to rebalance and recalibrate our own inner power, the recognition of greater forces, but still taking up the flame with a courageous heart, and then ultimately not just for ourselves, but for the entire world and world liberation, just like the Buddha taught us. And that's maybe another thing to get into in just a second. Two other things I wanted to highlight is that this is also now the moment in the next 2 weeks we'll have that first dip of Saturn into Aries. This will be on the 25th of May, and then Saturn will have his first dip into Mars sign of Aries, which of course also talks about this hero's journey and the quest and learning to fight and stand up, but also this waning conjunction, the Saturn and Neptune have a cycle just like the moon does with the sun, right? And theirs is maybe a bit longer, 37 years. So last time they were together was in 89, when the wall fell, when the Soviet Union fell, when all of these structures of power and authority, Saturn, suddenly dissolved. The Cold War dissolved, all of these things. So the waning conjunction, though, of Saturn and Neptune also talks so much about there are dreams and aspirations, Neptune, which we might have, but at the same time we have to yield to the force of fate and karma, where there are immovable objects, where there are forces we can't control. We can try to contain them and suppress them, just like King Minos did with the Minotaur, but they still demand sacrifice. They still demand a life force, right? The Minotaur had to be offered a couple of virgins every year, right, in the myth. And the waning conjunction of Neptune and Saturn, which will still hold sway over all of our lives until January 2026, is only when they will really be exactly conjunct. They'll be like within less than 1 degree for the entire time, but they'll only be really exactly conjunct by January. Talking about the huge endings of collective cycles, huge ending of personal cycles, and having to yield to cosmic time, divine timing. Again, a word that can seem so beautiful and flowery, and I'm trusting the divine flow, and it's all coming to me in right divine timing. But we as human beings tend to suffer a lot with that. And there's no way to sugarcoat that either. That the ego suffers when it realizes it's not in control, and there are greater forces, and there are immovable objects, there are mountains you can't climb, and they're not just some metaphor for you have to transform in an outer way. And this is again the gift that a Scorpio full moon brings. It brings up the deep waters, it brings the depth, it brings the unrecognized emotional deep yearnings and soul level desires, which can only really be confronted and integrated by going within. And so Saturn and Neptune for the entire next 10 months or so will still show us there are so many things we can't control, and we still have to get up and fight. We still have to do the right thing. We still, ideally, if you are on board with me, have to fight for the awakening of humanity and the liberation from all of this chaos, all of this mayhem, all of this warfare, all of this separation and this othering that occurs here on planet Earth. Yeah, last thing with the chart is that a couple of days after the full moon is when Venus will move over the degrees. I'm just going to go forward here. When Venus moves over the degrees by Wednesday, Venus will reach 9 degrees of Aries, which is where we had that last Aries eclipse at the end of March, right? Just after the March equinox, the Aries equinox, the very last eclipse. And whenever a planet tends to go over these degrees, especially the faster ones, they're bringing the energy down, right? We might have that eclipse that activates something in the collective field in the high astral, but then it takes Mars, Mercury, the moon, or Venus, or the sun to pass along and to channel that energy and to really bring it into manifestation as well. So that's on May 14th, Wednesday, and then another day later, May 15th, Thursday, is when Venus reaches 10 degrees, which is where she began her retrograde journey on the 2nd of March. So these 2 days, also Venus still, of course, ruling Taurus season, ruling the Sun in Taurus, and also this building Sun-Uranus conjunction, which will be exact by Saturday, right? So it's building of the entire week. We have that build-up moment or that explosive moment of the full moon, the release of the full moon. The cycle starts waning again, but then for the next couple of days, still the Sun-Uranus conjunction is starting to get closer and closer. So it's going to be a very interesting week. Also because Venus ruling Taurus, ruling the Taurus energy, she is in dynamic and driven, fiery, direct Aries. And by Wednesday and Thursday, she crosses these 2 very significant degree points, which will definitely bring us back to something that happened in late March with the eclipse and beginning of March, or the entire March, early April period when Venus was retrograde, like a culmination and a progress and a manifestation of all the deep inner work of recalibrating our relationship to ourselves, Venus, to our self-identity and our drives and instincts, Venus and Aries, but also our relationship, Venus, to Pisces, to spirit, to our ideals, to our dreams, to our visions, to what we want to bring into the world through the active side of Aries. The fiery, dynamic, active side of Aries has to be informed by the ending of the old cycle of Pisces, the dreams, the visions, the spiritual beliefs, the philosophical beliefs that we have there, right? So very interesting week ahead with these 2 points right after this culminative and purgative And yeah, maybe transformative Scorpio full moon. Like I said, every Scorpio full moon is a bit painful, but they often are liberating. They're like, oh, finally the monster's out of the cage, the Minotaur is slain, or the Minotaur is aired, and it's like, oh, now let's look at the shit, right? Let's bring the skeletons out of the closet so that we can make a clean table and actually confront or deal with what is really present in us and our relationships and so on and so forth. Again, pay special attention to where you have Taurus and Scorpio in your chart. Also, if you've got anything by the late degrees of the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, or Leo, Aquarius, this will be even more significant for you. And I'm gonna go back here. Still talking about the Wesak full moon for a moment. And also this the mythology of Siddhartha Gautama / the Buddha, and something which I already mentioned in the new moon video with Taurus. Taurus is the illumination of form. Taurus is the mother of form. It's the illuminate eye. It's bull's eye that pierces also the Scorpio side, that pierces through and penetrates physical reality to reveal the underlying, undying energy that lies beyond death. That's a Scorpio opposition. All the zodiac signs work by contrast, by the two sister signs, the opposite signs, which at the end of the day, they have that same desire and drive, but go at it from opposite directions. And where Scorpio has that desire to penetrate and go deeper and unveil and shed all illusions, right? In order to gain a sense of connection to something which is beyond form, beyond death, beyond life, Taurus tries to go the other way by embodying and creating more form, more life, more fullness, more abundance, more pleasure, more sense, more embodiment, incarnation, right? And the beautiful mythology, of course, which fits so well with the teachings of the Buddha, of the penetration of form leads to that which is beyond form, but we need the form in order to get there. And so what we tend to get wrapped up in so much is this denial and suppression of form, the suppression of the animal within us, the suppression of the embodied slowness of the Taurian energy, preferring so much the fast movement of the heroic, fiery mind of the fire and air signs and all the mental stuff, right? But with that, we can also see that only through the suffering and the decay and the decomposition of Scorpio that takes form away again, it takes it through the portal of death, is the essence of both Scorpio and Taurus revealed. The essence of Scorpio is not the rose in full bloom, but it's that endless becoming, which even when the rose withers, it's an imperfection. When it is just a seed or an idea beyond form, it's connected to the underlying immortality of life, which both Taurus and Scorpio both reveal in their own ways. And also the energy of Siddhartha as a Taurus sun, born during the full moon, but the moon in Scorpio, the penetrating desire of the Scorpio full moon to unveil illusions, but also doing so through the absolute stillness and tranquility of the full embodiment of going within. And so this is what every Scorpio full moon can also teach us, that no matter how intense the emotional, energetic dynamics around us are getting, how disruptive or eruptive the eruptions from the underworld might become, that by recentering and finding the stillness in the physical body, the embodiment in the presence and safety in our physical body, yes, that means we have to feel everything, including all the painful, uncomfortable things which the Scorpio full moon tends to and likes to excavate. Talk to your friends that got a Scorpio full moon. They are not the ones afraid of the taboo, of the darkness in the world, of the darkness in their own psyche, of the darkness of others, of the things that you don't talk about, of the things that one should be afraid of. No, they're like, okay, let's go exactly there. This is where true real life is happening. There's not some mask up. There's not some beautiful glamour of material form and whatever the ornamentation that we put in it all, but it wants to penetrate to the essence of things. But it also means that we have to feel whatever is there. We have to feel the entirety of it. We have to feel the dark, deep pit of despair or fear or anxiety or overwhelm or the confrontation of all the ways of where and how am I responsible for having lost my own power? Where have I actually created my own fate, my own karma, my own Saturn's checklist? And it's not some force out there that's trying to get at me, which we, especially in the Western mind, where we tend to confuse the Christian indoctrination of the concept of sin and sinfulness and wrong action with the Eastern concept of karma. It's just action and motion, reaping and sowing, where we think like, oh, I must have done something wrong in order to experience this karma, not maybe seeing like, oh, but maybe I experienced this because it's a teaching, or even it's a blessing, or I don't know how much worse my karma could have been if I would not have done X, Y, Z, right? But it's these kinds of deep questions that confront us with our own mortality and with also where and how we are ultimately responsible for our own karmas and fate. But then how can we change them is also shown, again, just drawing the picture of the Buddha as the enlightened one, by coming fully into the present moment, by just becoming still. And really allowing ourselves to feel it all, to really feel from the physical, human, animal body. To be deeply embodied and safe there, and then to experience it all. And from that present moment, from that state, that is when we can change the patterns, change the unconscious emotional patterns that may be holding a sway over our own lives. And in that way, unveil them, unveil what has kept us stuck, what has kept us limited. These are like lower Taurus energies, where like I said, the life force can get stuck or trapped, or we can become like very narrow, a tunnel vision that is only focused on physical survival or physical accumulation, but without the deeper meaning and deeper point of things. So that's just it. Some words for the Scorpio full moon. I think that's enough. Still some other interesting aspects in the mix. Jupiter and Chiron are making an inconjunct. It's called an inconjunct aspect. Maybe just going to show it to you on the chart real quick. So Jupiter and Chiron will be in a sextile, 60 degrees apart, almost perfectly, but they're both also making an inconjunct or quincunx aspect to the full moon, which is also sometimes called a yod aspect, like the Hebrew letter yod, or the finger of God, and talks about that the apex point, in this case the moon, is needed for the resolution of these deeper patterns, which are so hard to integrate with the yod pattern. There's two energies that don't mix with each other. Scorpio is a water sign, it's yin, and it's fixed. Whereas Gemini is a yang sign, it's air, and it's mutable, right? And so they have nothing in common, just like Gemini, just like Scorpio has nothing in common with Aries. And there we have Jupiter, our beliefs, our joy and hope and faith, and how we have trust into things, but also Chiron, our pain, our wound, our woundedness in regards to Aries, self-identity, instinct, willpower. And they're making that yod aspect to the moon. Just deepening all the story, which we already talked about now, of the recognition of these paradigms and these dichotomies between personal will and agency, and confronting bigger forces. The pain and wounding in regards to how how do we can still find faith and trust or meaning and sense with all the painful healing processes that we personally or collectively are living through. How can we confront the shadow and still bring Jupiter joy and optimism and hope to it all? So that might also be in the field for sure with the Scorpio full moon. And yeah, just gonna leave that here. I think that's enough. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know your perspectives and comments and experiences in the comments below. I'd be so grateful for that. And also if you feel like subscribing, I don't like to say that too much, but yeah, would mean so much to me. And I'll see you next time, and I hope you've got a good and potent healing Scorpio full moon portal and Venus over the eclipse points, over the retrograde points. There's a lot of newness that's coming next week. And yeah, the Shamballa impact, I forgot about that last minute. Shamballa impact, the Alice Bailey material. It said that on every 25th year of a century, so this year, at the Wesak full moon, so this full moon, that the Great White Brotherhood or spiritual hierarchy of beings like the Buddha, the Christ, and so on and so forth, these and truly high enlightened beings, most of them that we don't know with name or as big historical figures because they reach these stages without the necessity and their karma to create world religions out of them. But there were many beings that are just as great, if not greater, than these two, without wanting to measure in any hierarchical level of what is greater in that sense, which is so far away from our normal everyday human consciousness, these concepts or these levels of reality that these kinds of beings are living in. But yeah, it's sad if you feel like wanting to listen to this or believe in this kind of stuff, that every 25th year of every century, this Great White Brotherhood or the spiritual hierarchy is coming together in a conclave to kind of discuss and lay out the evolutionary plan of humanity at large, and to see where and how they're operating in what way, with always trying to interfere as little as possible, but still there is this growing awareness of their light and their presence, which wants to come back into manifestation. And if you feel like believing that, has not been in presence and full incarnation since the time of Atlantis, since these forces of materialism have been at play much stronger here. And because these forces of materialism know that their time is up, they know that planet and humanity is awakening, they're of course doing whatever they can to prevent that. And this is a battle for the heart and soul and spirit of humanity at large, right? They create all of these awful situations that we see on the world stage right now because they know their time is up, and still they try to hold on and maintain power. Can of course also just speak from the human level of like, oh, the patriarchy in the last 5,000 years, 6,000 years, and the accumulation of power, and the trying to hold on and contain to power, and it's all these old white men. And sure, yeah, that is one level, but I would say there's this deeper energetic spiritual level where we're part of these much greater cycles, and where even these men that try to hold on to power, or these politicians or whatever that are integrating these awful things, are deeply influenced by also these forces of materialism, by these forces that try to work for the veiling of the light, for the darkening of humanity, and not for the awakening of the light and the awakening of the heart and the spirit of humanity. And yeah, it's said that at this moment in time, for this full moon, there is this very important conclave, and that if you want to send thoughts and prayers or align your meditations or meditation groups also to this kind of impact of wanting to draw this heavenly light closer down to earth again, and sending light to all the places of darkness in the world that really need it, and there are really a lot of places that need it. I'm sure you know which places I mean, and that's not just the active war and conflict zones, but also the political powers and forces that are having a strong influence there, even if it's not in the same country, right? So if you feel like aligning your energy with that is deep spiritual, energetic, esoteric work. For some of you, whatever. It's like you enjoyed the full moon stuff I talked about, and this is like, oh, a bit too far out, but maybe some of you do resonate with that, and if you feel like aligning your energy a bit more consciously over the next couple of days with that Scorpio full moon, it can't do no harm. So anyhow, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you soon.